Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Eye of the Watchers podcast, where we give you all the information you need to get hyped about League of Legends esports. I'm host Sam, aka Just Casual. Here I have with me Manny, aka Manster.
Hello, everyone.
Today, I'm super excited because if you guys been following the preseason interviews and all this kind of stuff, I've been hearing the phrase jungle and support synergy a ton. And some of you might not know what that is. So we wanted to break that down on this episode because I think it's super, super important when it comes to figuring out everyone's rosters and things like that. So let's just jump into it first, talking about what the jungle and support role are. So Manny, which one would you like to talk about first?
I'm gonna say we should talk about the jungle first because I know a lot of people might be thinking, "Oh, support isn't that important." So, we'll leave the best for last, in my opinion.
All right.
Let's start with the jungle. As everyone knows, jungle doesn't really have a lane, right? So they're really in charge of the whole map, right? As soon as the game starts, they choose where to start. Bot, red side, blue side. And with that gives them the ability to really go wherever they please, right? Get vision. Sometimes early vision is actually very important, and some people don't really realize that because if you know where their jungler is, that gives you more information. So it's kind of like fighting for vision control early in the jungle, mainly your enemies. You also handle early skirmishes, which includes ganks, or just counter jungling, hunting for the other opponent, depending on picks. Yep. And I think the most important one that goes throughout like the entire game is just a neutral objective control, which goes along as well with vision, but it's making sure that you don't miss smite and you secure dragons and heralds and barons.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting when we say controlling the whole map. The thing is, like, you have territory, right? And whoever is stronger or whoever has the lead controls more of that territory, or should control more of that territory. Because if I am a fed jungler and I run into a jungler that is behind, that person's gonna die, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they should play safer, and I can play more aggressively because they have to concede on the neutral ground, or else they will die and give up more of the lead and stuff like that. So that's where like having control of the whole map is really, really important. When you have control of the whole map, that means that you can freely go to objectives. You can more easily get ganks and kill enemy laners and get your team more fed. And ganks are a huge thing when everyone kind of starts off. Yes, there's some advantages when you're going at 1v1, but you turn around all those advantages, you turn around disadvantages when you're able to gank and turn it into a 2v1 or a 3v2 in your favor. So that's where the jungler kind of, they're roaming everywhere, and they really do control a lot of what happens in the game and who gets the power. Or also, they can give up the power if they screw up too. So
right.
the jungle's a very difficult role.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think what you said is just holds so much truth to it, right? Is that, yeah, you can have a disadvantage in a lane, right? But being in charge of the map means being kind of like in control of all three lanes, right? I think realistically in pro play, you don't see many 1v1 kills, right? I think it's kind of like, if you do, it's because you messed up, right? It's not because like you should never die in a 1v1 in hindsight. But if you have a worse off like lane, you're losing your lane, whose job is it to help you? It's usually the jungler, right? To relieve pressure at the very least. So it is very tough to do. I mean, it's hard to know where to be at what time, right? And you obviously at high level play, that's something you already know. You already have a plan, and you're talking through with your teammates, which has a lot of the communication value added to it.
Yeah, exactly. And another part of bringing that to the table is a support role. Do you want to talk about that one, Manny?
Yeah, of course. So support roles, to start off, is they help out with the aggression in bot lane. With that, like we really mean is that depending on the pick, right? You there's so many different support roles that we can have, right? We can have playmakers slash engagers. We can have shielding supports. We can have supports that mainly just peel, right? Poke supports. There's a whole array, right? So depending on what support you're going to do, you're going to play lanes differently. But it's a good saying from all the AD carries or from people in the game is that supports that determine the lane, right? AD carries need to start getting fed, need to start CSing to get to a point where they have a lot of items and they become the unkillable and destroyers of the entire game. Starting off, you have the supports that will support you in the lane, will help you get advantages, will help you disengage, will help you keep a healthy pace within the lane. I think that's their initial role early, right?
Yep.
But once you have that, you have start having a heavier focus on the lane or on the entire map as well, or at least the bottom portion of the map early, right? And this is when you see if you have playmaking supports, you usually rush Moby boots. That way you can roam mid and then immediately you go back bot, right? Yeah. And it's very interesting because depending on your pick, you can influence the whole map. And then you have that, and then once you complete a Sightstone, or you have a couple control wards, you start helping your jungle, right? Keep vision in the bottom side of the map. So you start having like this vision battle with your enemy, with your and determining that again kind of goes back to even like objective control, like we mentioned. Like it is very important, right? And so that's another very important thing for supports. It does depend a lot on what is picked, because they might be a playmaking support, which means that they can't just like peel and be super tanky, right? Like they can't be in the back foot. But for the most part, that like those are their main objectives, right? Kind of influence the bottom side of the map.
Yep. Yeah, especially because they are gonna emphasize vision control. The good thing of the way the meta works for supports is that they don't need gold income to get the things that they need to do done. So they are inherently tanky, so they don't need to buy that many tanky stuff to get through the laning phase. They have utility, so they don't need tons of items when they can just put on shields and speed up their teammates and slow down enemies, like those kind of things. So that's why the support is what they are, and that's why they kind of just have, depending on what support you want to play, they have a lot of utility, they're tanky, they have engagement, but they're not usually the ones doing the most damage in the game. Of course, there are exceptions to everything that we say, but that's how the typical support role plays out, and therefore they focus on like vision and controlling the map with the jungler.
So Zyra.
With that, minus I say that as a one-trick Zyra main last season that did always had like second or first place in damage given to champions. So each game,
brand.
Even Malzahar support and stuff like that. But with that synergy, we want to talk about why everyone in the preseason and why teams are focusing on picking their players with this whole jungle support synergy in mind. So let's talk about this. Why are supports and junglers considered in the synergy? What is so important about those two roles, or what is so synergistic about those two roles to have a huge impact in picking your players on your team?
So I think the main thing, right? I think the first thing that we should mention is that even though the supports do care a lot about what's happening in the lane, right? They're very similar to junglers where they're not as mechanically intensive, which doesn't mean that the player doesn't have to be good mechanically, right? But it's more of like
saying that they aren't mechanically good players.
Exactly. It's more of like they don't have to do much, right? It's very few times like you don't even have to last hit, right?
Yeah.
Even with Targons, like it's usually very favorable and you don't even have to like truly last hit, right? And I mean, they will probably already know how to do that, but it's like they don't have to focus on laning, right? They don't have to focus on what their enemy is immediately doing. I mean, again, for supports, it's a little different, but at the same time, it's like, oh, they went to ward, so that means I can go to ward, right?
Yeah.
Or if my jungler is down here, like, so the jungler is going to be mainly just focusing with his camps, right, and kiting and stuff. But after that, like, he's going to be focusing on the map. And we already discussed this. That's something that the supports do, especially in the bottom side of the map. So they both have a lot of macro, right? Macro knowledge. For our fans that might not be super aware, that just means what's going on in the map, right? Which lane is being pushed in, which lanes are winning, which lanes, have power spikes coming, like stuff like that comes through like a macro sense. And even putting some vision in, your enemy jungle, that way when they're gonna gank. That's macro knowledge, right?
Yeah. And what ends up happening is, especially for supports over junglers, but especially supports, they climb the ranked ladders and they get to the top of the standings and become the best of the best, mostly through macro play, because they don't deal the most damage. They cannot do things really alone and carry the games like, a fed assassin that kind of snowballs the game from the mid lane or top lane or something like that. Or an AD carry that just stays safe and makes sure that they do the most damage in the team fights and they win off of the mechanical play. Supports, like, yes, you can get good hooks and have some flashy plays to get good engagements and wins. But for the most part, you don't have the damage. And if you make those good hooks, like if they're not at the right time or the right decisions or have thoughtfulness behind the decision to do those plays, like nothing comes of that. So you really need to, they emphasize having a lot of good macro and understanding of the game, because they're like, hey team, like let's stop fighting mid and let's split the map, or let's go do this objective right now, or let's go do this turret right now. And they actually win the game through more of like a chess match rather than like, like throwing 3-point shots,
aggression,
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's why you do see a lot of jungles and supports that are successful. They win because they have that good understanding. And then when we're talking about the top 1%, then the micro plays and the mechanics and getting those amazing hooks and stuff like that is really, really important to separate the cream from the crop.
Right. And I think also even Ole, right, such a famous support this year with Immortals, he got ranked 1. And people asked him, like, how did you get rank 1? Just purely playing support. And he was like, well, I made sure I got some early kills, right? So I could get my Moby boots and I could get my vision control like early. Yeah. And then I just roamed the entire map, like game, and just pretty much got all my lanes fed. And it's like, yeah, that's a solo queue mentality, but it does translate a lot professional, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it's kind of like going that extra mile of like knowing when to go, right? It's not, because I've seen people, I've seen even mid laners, right, do this where it's like, yeah, mid laners supposed to roam, but they just roam when their wave is pushing, like their wave is being pushed in, so they're going to lose experience anyway, and it's like they don't have mana, they don't like, you can't just roam whenever because you need to roam, right? It's a good understanding of this, having a good awareness of like, hey, mid laner doesn't have flash, right?
Yeah.
I have my full combo on full mana. I have Moby boots. Perfect time to go, right? Or their jungler is mid and their bot lane just bagged. I don't have much gold, right? Like we already talked about this. Supports don't have much gold to like be able to say, hey, yeah, I'll back exactly what so that's when they can roam, right? That's when they can start doing stuff. So it is a lot of awareness as well, right? Which I think is super important.
Yeah. So when we talk about these two roles where they don't have mechanically intensive laning phases or early games, and they have less gold, they dealing probably not as much damage. They have other things to focus on, and with their knowledge and stuff, they communicate well to each other. We talked earlier about having a lot of vision control because a jungler can roam around the whole map, so he can place wards wherever he wants, or he can sneak and take peeks into the enemy jungle. You have the support who can kind of build a sight stone, which allows them to put 3 or 4 wards down, plus vision denial, all these kind of things that they move together and they work together. At least successful teams, they work together. So the support doesn't necessarily have to go into the enemy jungle all by themselves. They can go with a jungler, or they both can go mid lane and gank for the mid laner, so they can take that turret together. So because these two roles have more time to look at the map, they have less, their brain is working less on certain things. They can use it for strategy, and then just their itemization builds and just like their role on a lot of teams. These are the two roles that really want to communicate and figure out how to lead the team and what the best decision for the team is to win the game, and then take all the information that their team tells them about each lane and then go ahead and basically make the conclusion that we're going to go mid lane in 2 minutes, or we're going to push bot lane with 4 people, teleport bot and dive, stuff like that. This is why that synergy is super, super important between those. Because if you've ever tried to last hit and like talk as an AD carry, it's not easy. It's really not easy.
Right, which makes it so rare, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's like, that's why you have very few AD carries that truly have like this shot calling call or the shot calling role, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think that's something else to note. I mean, most main shot callers are either junglers or supports, right?
Yep.
We see this a lot in so many teams. We would see this in C9 with Smoothie. We've seen this with Mithy, always being known as one of the best shot callers in the West after Yellowstar left, So I think it's important to note that, right? And it's like they just have like more time to look at things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether they
or
might
mental
still,
capacity, mental freedom or something,
Exactly. I'd say more so than mental capacity, more like mental freedom to do that, right? And it's they're not always thinking about like necessarily last hitting everything. And it's interesting for sure. It definitely is interesting and like way to view that, And again, I think this is the best time to go into examples of what has been good and what has been bad.
Yeah, what examples do you have for us, Manny?
So I think for this year, we're gonna for these examples, I want to stay with the NALCS just to have like a good view of a region, right? Because obviously it's different in Korea than it will be in NA, right? And it's kind of a little bit harder to judge like across regions, so we'll just stick with NA. I think that one of the greatest examples that just did so well and was talked a lot even by casters, right? Was the Xmithy and Ole synergy in the Immortals organization during the summer split. And it was, it is hard to see like the communication exactly.
Yeah.
But you would always see Ole kind of like at the right place at the right time, right? Going for these perfect timed roams, helping Pobelter with his lanes. Like some people would say like Pobelter's not the greatest mid laner, but like they were able to beat a lot of like the best teams, right? They were able to beat C9. They were able to push TSM to the edge, right? And I think that they did that a lot with like this synergy, right? Having a lot of vision control, playing, Alistar and like all these other champions, like when they were in that meta to push, right? Go with Rakan, like go for hard engages mid. So it was. I think that's one of like the greatest examples of like good. If you want to truly watch good jungle support synergy, probably watch Xmithy and Ole. I think that they might be the prime example. Let's go with like one that's a bit less, but it's still pretty good. I'd say it's going to be Smoothie and Contracts for Cloud9. Contracts came in this year. He was a rookie, and so there was a lot for him to learn, right? But Smoothie had
too.
Well, yeah, I mean,
pretty fresh.
Yes, yeah, Smoothie is pretty fresh. He has had like I think like an extra split or two. But he grew a lot with Reaper, as the coach, right? And this team had Meteos before. Like Meteos is one of the old guard like junglers, so I think Smoothie had a lot of practice with that. And with that said, I think he was a very big vocal point within the team. And with Contracts, he was able to help him a lot, right? Especially Contracts was one of those like very aggressive, risky junglers. Granted, yeah, they switched to like the tanky meta. But even when he'd play Kane, even when he play like Graves and stuff, like Smoothie was always there, like backing him up. They would invade the jungle together. They would go do two outlandish plays helped Jensen in the mid lane. Cloud9 always used to be known for the camping mid, like, oh no, you're camping Jensen. Well, we're gonna camp you back, type aspects. So I think that those two examples were probably some of the best in North America throughout the split and even throughout Worlds. Because both those teams did make it to Worlds, which entails there's one team missing, right? That went to
from
Worlds.
the top of the NALCS charts, right?
Yeah, and sadly, I want to say that their jungle support synergy wasn't the best, right? And that's TSM. And this was even talked about by Reggie, right?
Yeah.
Reggie had an interview with Travis Gafford, and we always quote other sources because it's true. It's difficult. I mean, to get all this information, right? But even Reggie was saying that like Biofrost is a great person, and Sven Skaren is a great person on their own, right?
Great players too.
Yeah, great players. Very mechanically capable. I mean, that's why they were part of TSM, right? Like TSM known as one of the top organizations, and like Sven Skaren was and is still, I think, is still a really good player. But like, why did he falter, right? Like, why was there like miscommunication? It's like they just didn't know how to communicate with each other, right? There was a lot of disconnect. And granted, yes, they beat Cloud9. Yes, they beat Immortals. That was the summer finals this year. But I think it was different because their lanes were so strong, right? Yeah. So you had Haunts, arguably one of the better top laners. You have Bjergsen, arguably one of the best mid laners. You have Double Lift, like arguably one of the best AD. So it's like you had like leading lanes. So you didn't really see that much suffering in the national stage. Once you went to international, people were like, "Why is Sven Skaren dying all the time? Like, what is happening? What is Biofrost doing?" Biofrost had good games. He had an amazing like summer playoffs. So that is the kind of like the disconnect that hadn't been really exploited that we saw. Right?
Because the talent is just that's why everyone praises TSM and their talent in North America. Everyone says that they're really good. They're just straight up, they're really good. Then on the international stage, when you're playing the best of the best, you suddenly see all those weaknesses being exploited. And like Reggie talks about this a lot, that maybe if they kept just Biofrost and changed the jungler, that might have worked. If they got rid of Biofrost and just kept Sven Skaren, that would have worked too. But the problem was that they weren't being assertive in their communication. They weren't making the calls. And both of them needed someone else to do that. So they would have replaced just one, but because they replaced their whole bot lane that used up 2 import slots, they didn't. But now with Mithy,
it had to be like different. Exactly.
Yeah. And now with Mithy being like a really, really great shot caller and very vocal in the game, they're able to bring in an NA jungler, Mike Young, who has a ton of promise, that TSM and Reggie believe that they can get up to the standards of TSM and World's caliber. When it comes to his mechanics, he's really good. And now he just needs to get smarter at the game, which already they talk about how Mike Young thinks about the game differently and he really uses his brain and he's really smart at the game. So now you pair that with Mithy, who's a veteran that is known on the world stage to be very good. You pair those two together, that's a really, really deadly combo. And who knows, Mike Young might become the shot caller like on par with Mithy, and then having two of those guys being able to strategically talk to each other inside of game and outside of game and then make the good decisions in game, like that is absolutely scary. But before, Sven Skaren and Biofrost, according to Reggie, the way they communicated was pretty lackluster, and then you would require other teammates to bring that up, right? And I know we've heard this before with the jungle mid synergy and mid laners being very, very, especially on team solo mid lane being a very important part of the whole team and probably the most valuable member on the team. Even though a mid laner can shot call, someone like Reggie still believes that support and jungle synergy is actually the most important important roles to be shot calling from and to be working together.
For sure. And I think that's not to say that shot calling is just a one person, two person thing, right? It's a whole team thing. It's like you do separate into different aspects. Like maybe the TP plays is purely called by the top laner, right?
Yeah.
It varies in teams. We're not going to go through this whole thing now, right? But like Bjergsen was known to start being like the big shot caller, right? That again, that was a lot of work on someone that is already has like it's the center point, pun intended, of Team Solo Mid, right?
Yeah,
and it's kind of like it's so much pressure, right? And then that's why you bring Double Lift, who's known for being a great shot caller in the ADC role, but it was just not working, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we're gonna have to say that this was not great, especially because we heard it from Reggie. Granted, like it didn't give results, so we could assume that it wasn't up to par. It might have been decent, but it wasn't amazing.
TSM is all about getting to worlds and winning worlds. So even though you win NA, that's not good enough.
Exactly. I mean, at least getting out of groups, I think is now the new expectation. But again, that's kind of like the tough point. But I think to finish it off, to really showcase how important the communication is, right? We have to go with one of the worst performing teams in NA this year, which was Team Liquid. And I don't want to discredit either of these two players. I think it's a similar situation like Svenskeren and Biofrost, right? I think they're good players. But they just didn't have that synergy. They just didn't mesh together, right? And it has to be Rainover and Matt. I mean, again, Rainover, everyone loves Rainover from the Huni days, like in Fnatic, and he was fantastic. And Matt, I think, is a very solid like support, right? Like he's not, you're not going to consider him the best support in the world or stuff like that anytime soon. But I think he is very solid. He is very understanding, and he's very mature and does a lot of the shot calling in Team Liquid, right?
Yeah.
But I think the whole like Team Liquid like slump just showed that this team was not prepared to even push for a top 4, like appearance like they usually do. And it just there was always a disconnect, right? Rainover wasn't at his potential, like, and Matt couldn't really do much because he was with Piglet all the time, right? And like it was very difficult to really showcase at any point that, wow, this could actually potentially be really good, right?
Yeah.
Even so, it went to the point where they ended up picking up Dardoch again, right?
Womp womp.
But Dardoch and Matt had already shown 2 years ago that they didn't have good synergy, right? They made a documentary about how awful, like the synergy was within that team. So it just shows that like you could have even decent players, right? But it's not gonna be like the synergy you might even want to have, like even a mid-tier team, right? Because that's exactly what Team Liquid wasn't. They're not even mid-tier, right? And they had great players. So I think that synergy, that communication, that shot calling is what really fell behind for that team.
Yeah, I think like this is very, very evident from the episode that we talked about last time, which was All-Stars. You put together an all-star dream team of probably, it's most popular, but / most likely the best players of the region, and you see some bad macro play because guess what? The support jungle synergy isn't there, or the synergy between all the teammates and stuff, but the jungle support synergy is not there to make the right shot calls, to make the most efficient decisions and make strategies on the spot. It's just missing. And it's interesting that you talk about Rainover and Matt, because I think the sad thing about that duo is that Matt, I think, like you said, is a very smart guy and knows the game very well. But he also is someone that I've seen to kind of tilt and lose confidence as well and just become silent. And I think we hear that in that break what is it called?
Breaking point.
Breaking point, where Matt just kind of stopped communicating because he was just like lost his voice in the team. Then you have someone like Reignover, who was an absolute genius that people totally respected so highly, saying that he was probably the number one jungler the season when he was with Huni on Immortals. Someone that's just not showing up in the jungle at all anymore. And that's, again, like, I think what happened with Immortals is that he had someone able to say and lead the team, like speak and lead the team. So Reignover was just doing his own thing and playing the jungle game and the jungle top synergy. And I think Huni just asked Reignover to gank, and he would just do that. So Reignover was really intelligent, but he wasn't able to communicate with the whole team well. And it's weird because people would say like it's his English, but it's actually not. His English is pretty good now. So there is legitimately a communication barrier between the support and jungle, or the shot callers and the team, not because of English. It's because of synergy.
Right. It's different. Like, again, let's say we were to grab Ambition, right? Someone that hasn't ever spoken English, right? Or like it hasn't even had like tutors for like 2 years, right? And told them, oh yeah, play with Matt. Like, okay, maybe we'll see even worse results, right? I think it's evident it's like a slumping years, and that's why I think this year, like my bold prediction for this year, which we might be able to do an episode on, just like bold predictions for the year. But my
and then we can delete it
once
we're wrong about everything, right?
Yeah, we just immediately delete. But
I don't know what you're talking about. We never said that.
It's like, what? No, I did not say that Team Liquid would finish first. Oh God,
is that crazy?
Sam, delete it now. But I think that this might be Reignover's redemption. You know,
we hope so.
I think he is in a great organization with a really smart coach, and this is not to discredit Team Liquid, it just clearly didn't work, right? But I think that if he's gonna come back to his old self, CLG is the team that's gonna push him to that, because you have a bit more, right, than you did. I mean, it's gonna be with Biofrost, so we're gonna see if even Biofrost can communicate better, right, with a high, like potentially a higher caliber, player. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see that. But I think it shows it's not even like language barrier. Sometimes it just don't click, right?
Yeah. Yep. Totally agree. So now the last point we want to make before closing out this episode is, okay, we've been talking about how great jungle support synergy is. Is it really required? We've made a lot of good points, and now we kind of want to make counterpoints like, is jungle support synergy the most important thing? And why? So now, why is it not the most important thing? Or why might it not be the most important thing?
Yeah, I think the big thing is the meta shifts, right? I mean, we saw it at Worlds. Like, it went from, completely playmaking. Granted, like, there were teams, aka Misfits, that shattered Worlds meta. But when you're just a shielding support that has to babysit your ADC for 50 minutes, you're not going to be doing that, right? That's not what you're going to be looking for. So I think meta shifts might be a really, really big one. Maybe not.
I would say if you have like support junglers and support bot laners, right? And then you have like heavy engaged top lane and mid lane, then probably the top lane and mid lane for the most of the game are the ones that want a shot call and say go, right? The jungle and supports will get vision when they can. But then again, vision early game might not be super important when bot lane's just like farming under turret and they don't want to push and stuff like that. So
and you're playing with definitely affect Ivern, right? Like that doesn't want to like 1v1 or
like so the meta definitely affects like what role wants to be the voice. So yeah,
right. And with that in mind, like, sure, maybe the jungler can always kind of like reliably be the main shot caller, right? Or like at least the early game shot caller, right? It depends on the team, obviously. But for example, with mid jungle synergy, I think it's very interchangeable for the most part, right? Like you can change the mid and the support.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on comps, but I think it's, really, like we even mentioned with TSM, right? I think with TSM, the more important thing was the jungle mid synergy more than the jungle support, right? So maybe it's not necessarily that important, because if you have a good mid laner that knows how to shot call and has maybe a less impact of carrying the game,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's who you want be, your main point of focus to help with the jungling,
Yeah,
right?
I think
Or yeah,
if we look at some examples, I think SKT is a good example of this as well. Previously, they have had very cerebral junglers that are really smart and probably did a lot of shot calling, but definitely SKT supports like have been known for their like shot calling engagements and stuff like that. And then when you have someone like Faker, who's actually like a one of a kind genius when it comes to how this game is supposed to be played, I think Faker probably calls a ton with the information uh, in tandem with the support, with a ton of information from the jungler and support.
right. And I think even within SKT, it might change, right? Because sometimes they're known for having like the double jungle, and so with one jungler, it might be completely different, right? Which was kind of like what we saw with Peanut,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
It didn't work out as well because like Peanut wanted to be the aggressor and stuff, but he was like,
A
"Oh,
word
need the
bot.
help? Yeah, I'll go bot. I'll go mid. I'll." So I think it's very interesting as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's times that you even have like that maybe mid jungle is better because you have a team like Longzhu Gaming, right? Where you focus more on the top half of the map. So like, why is Gorilla going to be necessarily working in tandem with like your jungler, right? If Prey and Gorilla are just going to be being pushed under tower, taking all this beating, and hopefully Khan and everyone else can like take the lead. So I think it depends, right? So
Yep.
it's very team dependent. It's very meta dependent, and sometimes it's just ability dependent, right?
Sure.
I think we mentioned double lift, right?
Uh-huh.
So maybe what if it's not Ole this time, but double lift, making the synergy with kind of like the jungler, right? Maybe it doesn't work as well, but maybe it's just he's going to be the main shot caller, but the jungler's going to help him, right? So they're going to focus more on the bot side of the map, right?
Yep.
So I think it just varies so much that it hasn't always been like this, right? I think it's more recent topic as well. So
Yeah. Yep. Cool. Anything else we want to talk about with that? I think we covered a lot of it.
yeah, I think if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Oh, yeah. So with that, if you do want to contact us, the best way to do that is probably Twitter. You can tweet Manny at Manster415 or me, Sam, at JustCasual9. That is in the episode description if you want to reach out to us. We also have a new Twitter account for the podcast at EWatch Podcast. So check that out as well. We have very little followers. So if you want to get the little tidbits that we share of like small clips of the episode or just announcements that we have and want to communicate or give feedback, Twitter is probably the best place to do that. Besides that, don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes or Google Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcast aggregator is. All you have to do is just find the Eye of the Watchers podcast on there. There's some links in the episode description as well. That way you can we don't have like a really set schedule when these guys release. We just kind of do them when we can. And sometimes we do.
Yep,
I think we're trying to do a minimum of one a week with the goal of like 2. That being said, we're working on like a big project right now to kind of recap all the NALCS teams. So we might just do one a week while we like ramp up to like release 10 in like 1 week or something like that.
Yeah, or like five in 1 week, 5 in the next. I don't know. Well, the point is that we love doing this. Mm-hmm. So you're definitely going to be getting content. So definitely reach out to us. I mean, if you have any suggestions, if you have any concerns, definitely let us know. I mean, we do want to work this podcast up from the ground. I think it's really fun to do so.
Yeah, cool. So with that, thanks for listening to this episode of the Eye of the Watchers podcast, where we give you all the information you need to get hyped about League of Legends esports. I am Sam.
And I am Manny.
And we will see you guys next episode.
Bye.